Morning, guys. How's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing well. This is going to be a scan for the upcoming week here, going into October. I believe it's 14th. I definitely should have checked before I hit record. Actually, it's the 11th. Whatever. So October 11th, but also the foreseeable future. A lot of setups here that I want to kind of go over, and it's more than I usually do. So just sit back, relax, and let's get started. So first one is going to be QQQ here. Very, very intriguing setup, very similar to TSM, as I've stated multiple times now, with this absorption of the gap here. I'm still, like I said before, I'm expecting some kind of drop. I don't think that we're going to get through this 488.28 level that easily. I think it's going to take a little bit, maybe one more breach of that level or a gap up into that and a sell-off. Either way, right, I still expect to have, and I deleted the trend line, but I still expect to have some kind of higher low form out against here, right? You guys don't need a trend line for that, but I expect the low, higher low, higher low. So a second consecutive higher low, and I expect it to come. If you guys want to say it's off the trend line, that's okay. It's going to be a subjective area, but I think it comes right around here, which is this previous gap up, right? It kind of ties into this old progression gap here, a flurry of daily bars where we built out some good base here, and it just kind of looks like the right area. If we zoom out to the weekly as well, you guys will see this will line up pretty nicely with the 921, right around that 21 EMA on the weekly. So just a general area that I'm looking for. It's also heavily bid via dark pool. It's a pre-market print as well, so this is a big spot for me. And really, we kind of had this hanging man candle form on Friday, right? This looks like obviously a hammer, and I think you could have a lot of people get really bullish into this, but I really don't like to take hammers or anything like that, for that matter, at the top of these zones like this. There's definitely better spots you could have taken this, right? You could have taken it down here. You guys could have taken it back here, right? On higher lows or previous bases of key resistance as now support, rather than taking it and kind of like a big major supply area, right? This is an area that has a ton of supply that hasn't fully absorbed this spot yet. So a risky spot to add any fresh longs, especially considering how much you're paying for how little of a reward you'd get, right? You'd be taking it here. Contracts are really, really pricey. You're only looking at a $10 move, right? So still, in my mind, I would like to see this sell off, and really I think this confirms under a break of 478.60 or 478.83. This is this like miniature daily support zone. You guys can see the plethora of daily lows that are here, stemming all the way from Thursday the 19th. It has here, you can just even round this one down a little bit here, here, right? If we go to the hourly as well, this should kind of obviously give you guys a better picture just how pivotal this floor is, right? And then obviously if we sink through this floor at 478.83, I think that we dive all the way down to where this candle ended up kind of having its, you guys can clearly see the gap here, right? The close is right here, or the open technically is right here at 474, but the candle close before the gap up is at right around this 471 spot. So obviously I think this is the target, right? I think this is going to trade down into to fill the actual gap around 471. And that would line up really nicely here with this trend line as well. So I'm not going to play this short, guys. I know a lot of people are going to ask me, like, are you going to short this? I think the best thing to do, very similar to back here, right? If you guys remember when we had these three lower lows, where we had daily equal lows, the sweep, and then the secondary sweep for that capitulation long, where then it marked up, right? And it did it all in low volume. I think we're going to have kind of the same thing happen, right? And if you guys are SPY traders, I think it's just going to undercut, right, that all-time high, which was right around here. This kind of failed here, so I think SPY is even a better thing if you wanted to go short to do. Just kind of risk that all-time high. But like I said, I think best thing to do, I'm just going to wait, let this thing come down, and instead of trying to take the short here, like these two, this previous zone that I talked about last time, I'd rather just take the long. If you guys remember, I longed once it reclaimed that zone. I would just kind of long, same thing, right? Once it reclaimed, kind of holds and gives a good bullish print off of 471 or this trend line, and then I'd be willing to risk probably 460, which is this bottom progression gap. So
QQQ is still very much on watch. I think if this does play out and come to fruition, this will probably be my biggest position. But yeah, that's going to be number one for me. That's going to be on watch, and this is obviously going to be one that takes a little bit of patience. So I'll always have this on my side screen, and I'll primarily be watching this on a daily chart. Right, I'm not going to really dive into like the 5-minute or the 15-minute or anything like that. So just really watching the daily and watching it, especially as it starts to break under 478. Then I'll switch down to my lower time frames and kind of watch its reaction down here to 471. This is old, reliable, old familiar. You guys should be very, very familiar with this chart. So crowd is going to stay on the menu, boys. I know we should still have runners now. This thing has gone 100%, and it's okay to trim that. And I mentioned that in the recap video. But this is where rolls can come in handy, right? There's I guess a plethora of ways that we could roll this one. But first and foremost, I did mention that I think we could gap up on this one. Even though volume's pretty low, there's a lot of buying that's been coming in off of these key demand zones, as you guys can see. That really stemmed from this markdown phase, right? Where I think a lot of the buying actually was occurring here in these general ranges. And you started to see little trickle effects of other buyers stepping in pretty heavy and leaving those footprints behind, as we like to say. But yeah, if we push up to 300, I would like to either see a high tight flag where we kind of catch up to our EMAs here. That's why I drew it this way, where we end up pushing up, hitting 300, probably rejecting and then pulling back into either the EMAs, or you guys should start to look at it this way too. Maybe we pull back and actually get a structural retest of 290. That would be another entry there. So that's kind of like the first area that I'm going to be watching for ads, right? Whether we get a high tight flag there or an actual pullback there. Or if we miss all those, right, let's just say we gap up, it's the simple break and base above 300.45, right? And this one's going to be a little bit harder. I do think we could get some kind of sweep effect that maybe stops us out or kind of scares some people. This would be the one where I would size in a little bit lighter, just because we are taking technically a breakout. And you never know, right? If something looks like it breaks out on the 15 and it closes above on an hourly, it could just be a sweep, right? And it closes below. So these are always ones I like to size in a little bit lighter on. I like to grab a little bit more time. That way, if it does break under, I can have the decision like, hey, do I want to hold these and wait for 290 to add more, or do I just want to cut these for a small loss and then wait for 290, right? So this will give me a little bit of a timely decision to have. So those are the main two spots I'm really watching, but I do think that this chart needs to stay on watch. This thing is trending beautifully. We have higher lows. We obviously had that change of character starting way back here, but then we have now a break of structure where we now broke that immediate lower high. We're just trending, right? This thing looks really good. We just need this thing to confirm above 300 to have continued faith in this, where I do think we have an easy trajectory up to 316.75, up to 336. That's just the daily gap. I do think we pushed to 342. So big targets here, guys. This chart needs to stay on watch. It needs to stay on watch. And I'm not going to let anybody distract me. I don't care if Mara looks good or all these other charts that people are stemming or waiting on or kind of stemming current positions from. I don't care. Like, this crowd needs to stay on watch, and that's where a lot of my focus is going to be as well. Weekly looks fantastic, right? The weekly still looks primed. It looks like it's going to go for a continuation, albeit the volume isn't super high, right? We haven't had the breakout yet. So remember, all we need to see is harmonic breaks or previous resistance, and then diverging pullbacks into either that resistance that was broken to act as support, or those gaps, right? And then give it time to see if they can reconfirm back above levels lost. This was harmonic break through this lower high here. We had a 2-bar weekly pullback on diverging volume into a gap. I mean, it's very simple. So now we just need to see high volume break through 300 and a close above, and then a retest of that, and we kind of know we're in safe hands. So crowd still on watch, 350 target. Old familiar number 2, AMD. Juice is still available. We did breach the gap on this one, so this one's a little bit different. And similar to what I just said with crowd, guys, it did already get that pullback and reclaim of 162. I was able to capitalize on that with that 15-minute pullback right there. You guys can see the candle close just above 162 on the daily, but on the 15, it just broke out, and then it pulled back and consolidated. Big gap up here. Remember I talked about we do have the AI event coming up on the 10th, so on a Wednesday of this week. So I don't know if we'll even be able to get a pullback, but there is potential for this to pull back and hold 170.90, which is this top of the gap here. If it can act as support, I think there's a potential to grab shorter dated contracts, right? I'm in the Novembers, I'm in the October 25th, maybe a roll down to October 18th with some lighter size, or that imminent push to fill that gap around 176, 177. and then be out of that, right? I think that phase would be done, and on to the next one, right? But this is just kind of one that I wanted to post there. I do think this one plays out this week, obviously, and yeah, this is just one I wanted to add on here in case people missed this one, which I don't know how you guys missed because we took ads here. There was ads here, there was ads here, like there's like 3 different spots I alerted this on, but another one available here. But just remember, the higher you get, the more risk you're absorbing, and the shorter the squeeze, right? I mean, you're only getting now, in my opinion, 7 points, whereas before all the other spots that I alerted, that was 20. Back here, I mean, that was 30, right? So you guys can kind of get the gist of it. So yeah, this one still needs to be on watch. Just a little bit left out of this one, but definitely still worth the squeeze if we can get that move. 7 points with maybe like a 2-week contract could play out really nicely. If not, though, just this is kind of my reminder. Like you just can hold these contracts up into the spot. I do think that this continues to 176.80. All right, guys. MU still needs to be a big focus here. This is one I've been really patient on, and I still have my notes here. If you guys have seen this, this is kind of funny. But yeah, just being patient with this one. Obviously, a clear divergence on this pullback into the peg, right? Now, usually these pegs are defended. Eventually, you'll see some kind of mitigation midway through it if it does, and then some kind of trap. I think that trap might play out on the monthly chart here, where we end up kind of wicking down into the peg and then having a big explosive move up. But so far, right? I mean, we're holding the 0.5 pretty nicely. We can obviously use like the weekly just to get a better view of this, but holding it nicely. We're kind of holding the upper echelon of this weekly chart from September 23rd. But yeah, tapped right into discount, so contracts are discounted. This is what I said I wanted to wait for, rather than taking contracts up here, right around 108. And there's 2 different ways that we could play this, right? I mean, clear resistance here at 108. This was the earnings candle low. You guys can see we swept it a little bit here, and we swept it a little bit here with a close above. So clear buyers that are defending this spot. Then we broke down, we retested it as a bear flag, broke down, made a new low, and filled the gap simultaneously. Then pushed up. What do we have? This now became a resistance and a lower high. And then we pushed down for what should have been another lower low, right? This is that area that we went long off of. And now we broke out, right? We pushed up, might have baited some fresh buyers at the highs here, and we're pulling back down. And it's very easy, in my opinion. This is an easy spot. We either take it off of the 618 ad here to fill the peg and then risk the lower gap down here. If it ends up breaking underneath the 618 in the peg, right, I do think it comes here. I would just be out of this, because if it comes here, I don't really think that there's a reason for it to not sweep underneath these daily equal lows and just fill the gap at 81.50. That's where I would add more shares and just kind of be a share player at that point, maybe some leaps off of that. But if it doesn't give us the 618 entry right around here, right, just in this general zone, I think the safe play is just let the big buyer step in, whoever it may be, and really start the uptrend again, and just look for a simple pullback of this old lower high, this fake sweep here, as well as the earnings candle low, right? This is 108.78, and then I would really just kind of risk that spot. And I think this has a really easy pathway back up to this up here, guys, 122 or 123.03. Let's move it down a little bit. Let's just actually use the real gap here. So 122.58. I have it coming to 127.81, but yeah, I mean, this is a really nice move here. So 2 ways to go about this: either the ideal entry off the 618, kind of the most discounted you can get, with risk now being 90.97, and then just for a visual representation, it would kind of look like this right there, and then we'd be targeting 1 for that 5R, and then 2 as the 6R, right? So just a really quality trade from a risk to reward perspective. Obviously a share position and a leap position. I'm looking at those March contracts, maybe even a little bit deeper. We could maybe go June contracts if we get a pullback to this, and then really refine our risk. And remember, I always talk about context. You can then risk weekly candles at that point and really let these things play out on larger time frames before you stop out or you take profits. But yeah, the other opportunity is right here, right? And I would just kind of risk that general area, like a weekly close, and see what we can get. And then ideally, we get a breakout through this earnings candle high or this footprint candle high, really confirm above that. And obviously, we wouldn't get a straight shot like I have drawn. We'd probably get something like that and then move. But yeah, targeting 127, I would just use the 130 C call. Really depends on expiration date, depending on how we get these levels, right? If we get the pullback, I obviously want to get some more time on these, so I would look, like I said, for like June of 2025. If we just start trending upwards and we break 108, I'll probably look at January or March's, right? Still want to get some time on these ones because that's a pretty large target, guys. Like that's nearly a 20-point move, so that's a pretty big move there. So. And that's going to need a little bit of time. You got to think as it makes its way up, it's probably going to sell off a little bit, have higher lows. So you got to be able to stomach that and obviously have enough time to where it doesn't hurt the contracts drastically. But MU, definitely a big focus here, guys. This chart looks fantastic. All the criteria that you want to see for kind of like a coiled pop, especially after a peg like that and a big beat, and obviously one of the leaders here in the semi industry. Okay, preface, this is the last of my major focuses, right? These are going to be the main charts that I'm looking at that I'll probably have the most size on if I do take a position. So Amazon is going to be the final one. The rest are like secondary charts that I feel like need more time to play out, but will also, right, if I take a position, yield less size, okay? So Amazon, I talked about this on Wednesday, which was like back here, maybe it was Tuesday. We were looking for that pullback, and it's a very bread and butter play, very fundamental from how I trade, and a lot of people in here now, where we had a break of a lower high as well as a gap, right, where we ended up rejecting this. It sold off at a higher low, kind of just held this progression gap in this range here. If we can just mark that so you guys can see these, held the progression gap, popped out on harmonic volume, and then really just started to hold above with low vol, right? No indication sellers were trying to press this down. You guys can see how much it stagnates right there, and then it continues a little bit higher. What do we end up doing? We end up selling off, and now we're pulling back one more time to actually retest the zone. We never retested it. So it's very intriguing from a technical perspective of how this is going to play out. We did see a good defense here of 180, 187, and then we had that really nice gap up from data. I think this was NFP on Friday. So, right, if we take a look, it defended the level that we wanted to see, and it gave us a really bullish weekly close here, guys. Really nice weekly close. Not the highest volume, I will say that, but it gave us a good print. It gave us good defense of the area. So, really, this would be a continuation trade where I would be looking to, either take calls over Friday's high, which would be that weekly high, and I'd be targeting 195.37, or just kind of looking to see if we can pull back here. And this should be very, very similar, and hopefully you guys can remember, I always talk about photographic memory. What chart kind of gave us a very similar setup to this, and it didn't come off of a lower high like this, it came off a double bottom, but pull back into what? The progression gap, look for a move up, claim Friday's high, and then trade up. Like this whole range should look very familiar. If you guys haven't answered it yet, it's Oxy, right? Oxy was very similar here, where we had a break through the kind of like the progression gap. We filled it, and we were looking for progression gap to become support. We touched the bottom of the progression gap. Actually, it was like right here. We got pretty close to it, but yeah, touched the bottom of the progression gap, broke out above, and then we retested the top of it with Tuesday's candle, and then we ripped to that high right here, right? So kind of the same exact setup here. I should probably go back to that really quickly and just use like an hourly format of it so you guys can see what that looks like. Right? I mean, let's take a look here. I mean, this whole area should have been green, but you guys can see we kind of sold off into the double bottom. We broke out midway through, started to fill the gap, pulled back down, tweezers off the bottom of the progression gap, ripped through, absorbed this resistance here. We sold back down, right, kind of towards the bottom of the progression gap again, but then pushed what? Above. We closed above, and then we consolidated, opened, tapped down a little bit, right? You guys can see this is literally a progression system. Hold the bottom. Okay, once we hold the bottom, let's break through the top and try to absorb those sellers. We did. Pulled back, still a higher low, but still closed above this, right? Even though it sells down, it's still about how the daily forms out. These need a little bit of time before they end up playing out too, right? But we ended up closing above. We held here, right? So now bottom and top of the progression gaps have been held. Next morning, we end up opening. We can't sell underneath the progression gap, and then it rips, right? So the same thing with Amazon. Right? Maybe we get something like this. Okay? Got to be looking if we can get maybe a pullback towards the bottom of the progression gap or the top. Excuse me. I'd be looking for ads on this. Pretty simple. very easy in my opinion. Or breaking base above Friday's high, and I think we can get a big markup to 195, right? Maybe 200 calls would be the perfect sweet spot here with some time behind them, but almost a similar structure here. And yeah, I think this can play out. So this is going to be one of my other main focuses, just depending if we get the pullback or we get the break of Friday's high, right? So let's jump into some secondary charts now. Just some light ideas that I'm going to be kind of looking at on a side screen. And a lot of them are going to be swings, but also a lot of them too, I think, have the opportunity for a bit more of aggressive positioning. So let's take a look at those. Okay, Lamb Research, guys, I feel like I have to keep my eyes on this one. I talk about a lot with semis leading the way, and you're having a lot of the names that I thought would lead the market, and they did, right? They obviously pushed QQQ up into the gap. I think there's going to be a secondary set of semis that will continue to lead, and then the names that previously led will now become laggers, right? So TSM was a good example where this kind of led that big pop out. MU obviously was another one that really started that big breakout, right? NVIDIA was a big one where we started back here. We obviously are starting to get a little bit tighter now. It's not running as much. AMD, right? Big move from AMD. But I still think that there's a lot of names out there. Avgo would probably be another one where I think, Avgo has a ton of potential to just rip again to make a new high. ARM, very similar situation, but just not as pretty of a chart. So I wanted to go back to LRCX because LRCX, if you guys don't know, Lam Research makes all their chips. I know this because my girlfriend works there, my girlfriend's dad. So, I mean, Lam Research does a lot of the work for everybody, right? A lot of that is facilitated to Lam Research, and they make their chips. So I think this name is bound to pop, and what I was waiting for was the split on October 3rd, right? These were previously trading at $700, $800. And it was pretty expensive, right? I mean, it's hard to get a lot of shares at that price point. So the fact that they split, and you can kind of see here at this low, right? We see big signs of accumulation with no real low being made, and it happened against a really key monthly level, guys. This pulled down and sold into this monthly level on pretty controlled volume, and then we start to see some decent buying stepping in, or at least increased buying that's kind of masked off of these previous 2 months from August and September, right off this previous monthly resistance. Very intriguing spot, right? Very intriguing. The weekly, you guys can clearly see high volume here, right, on this weekly, even though it's sold, right, didn't really make a new low, and then it gets instantly mitigated, right, and then you guys can start to see the high volume that's still continuing there at the lows without a new low being made, and it's even more apparent on the daily, right, just random spikes where it sweeps under, high, and then a very high volume close back above that spot. This is honestly telltale signs of accumulation, and you just kind of wait for that markup. So we did get the markup, we started to push, and now we're pulling back on decreased volume into the split where now shares are more affordable. I think we're going to get an increase of demand coming back into the stock now that it's cheaper, and I think they're going to get a nice push into this level up here at 106. With that newfound demand, right, new buyers stepping in, as well as the people that were accumulating this entire range before the split, now that they have a bundle of inventory that they collected and it's split, they now have 10x the shares. That's easy to mark up to this gap here, right at 106, and then sell that thing off. But now it's basically basing into this old progression gap here. You have your EMAs right underneath, bundled up. Dude, this thing looks so good, guys. This thing looks so freaking good. I would really just kind of look for it to push 90 first. Historically, right, I mean, you kind of look to the left first naturally, but I think the most recent price action is going to be what is tested first, just because there is going to be that newfound kind of like buy presence, in my opinion. So I'd be looking for 89.51. This was that lower high before it kind of pushed it for that double bottom. And if it can give us that, right, I mean, I don't really see a reason why it stops. I could see it basing here, but really just long-term target be 101.92 to 106.28, guys. I think this thing goes absolutely nuts. And if you even want to take a share position, if we get somewhere in this general range, like that's a 33% move on the underlying. But I think this chart goes absolutely insane. We have earnings coming up October 23rd. So yeah, Lam Research is going to be a big watch for me. This is 100% like a reaccumulation or an accumulation, whatever you guys want to call it here. But yeah, I love this chart. I think this needs to stay on watch here. And I think, honestly, this and MU are probably two of my favorites, especially once AMD rolls off, guys. You got to realize AMD is almost done. So once AMD rolls off, I think MU and Lamb Research are going to be my two favorite semis. So just keep this one on watch. I haven't really looked at the options contracts too much because prior to the split, they were pretty spready. They were really expensive because they were the valuation of obviously the stock. So maybe the bid ask tightens up a little bit. It becomes a little bit more tradable via options. But I absolutely want to trade this chart and see if I can get some like 110 calls for some maybe like mid 2025 and swing this because I think this will pay very, very big. But yeah, that's going to be one of my first secondary focuses. All right, so one that I don't really see a lot of people talking about is Roblox here. I've talked time and time again, guys, about how this is a weekly accumulation, and this thing might be ready, guys. You guys can see we're starting to trend up. We're really making these consistent higher lows now out of these the previous base down here. It really started back here on in May, right? But now we're starting to trend up. We're getting pretty close to having our second consecutive higher low. You guys can see we're now breaking out above, and we broke through on harmonic volume through this little mini lower high resistance here at 4080. But now, what do? We pushed up, we hit this resistance here, which is kind of like our internal resistance, our internal range resistance at 47. You guys can see multiple weekly rejections here, right? Ton of rejections and a lot of absorption occurring here simultaneously. But we hit this. We didn't really sell on high vol, but now we're pulling back into this 40-80 level, right? So this is a key opportunity for old lower high to now turn support. We saw a good hammer actually form here on Friday, right? So I'm going to be kind of watching this, not going to lie, off of 40-80. For a potential bounce and continuation back up to 47. And in a picture perfect world, guys, we're going to have to look at this on the weekly because it's taken so long to play out. Picture perfect world, this bounces, takes out 47 because this whole zone's been pretty absorbed, as I said. See, this chart's been consolidating so long, it's hard to like get the perfect zoom on it. But if it can bounce here, guys, I really think that this can push 47. Once it claims 47, I think that we can get some kind of consolidation here, and then really I think it trades all the way back up to 53.88, and then the target long term would be 60 or 59 to 66, right? And I think that's this whole consolidation and what the final result would be from that. It's this gap fill way back here, right? So like I said, it's pretty hard to like capture all this and just it's hard to do it because it's been consolidating so long. But yeah, this thing looks really good. I'd probably have to swing these guys because who knows, this could consolidate a little bit longer. But really, I would just kind of be looking off 40-80, maybe taking 5 contracts, going like a year out or so, and trying to target, I would say 53 to 59. I want to try to get this up here. But yeah, I mean, even just from like an EMA perspective, guys, this pulled back into the EMAs really nicely. And a lot of people really aren't looking at this. A lot of people were looking at this name at all the wrong times, I've noticed. And I think now is the perfect opportunity with this pullback for another higher low to be set. This level up here at, like I said, 47 has been adequately absorbed from what I'm seeing. Much different than the previous levels or previous rejections of this spot with the high vol. Really just seeing really controlled low vol here. So this name definitely needs to stay on watch. So I'm going to be on this one with a secondary screen, as I said, and just kind of keep my eyes on this. Alright guys, so this is actually one that we traded not long ago. This was Roku. We actually caught this really nasty move up, if you guys remember, and I closed these as they were leading into the gap here. And I was kind of waiting for a roll, but it's been a lot longer than I expected, where we've had pretty much 3 weeks of consolidation. We did have a breach into the gap here at like 78.61. And typically when you see a sweep like this, you'll see a big move to the downside because in this circumstance, the longs would have been trapped. But we've seen pretty much 3 weeks of consolidation at this like breakout candle, pretty much it's high, right? We've just been consolidating here. We have a gap a little bit below from 70.20 down to 72.46, just below. But it's holding that pretty nicely. And I'm honestly looking at like new ads on this one off of 2 things. Either we sell down a little bit and then reclaim back above. So if we can get a move down into 70.20, push back above 72.46, reclaim that, I might look for an entry off of this, right? I don't really want to time a bottom here, but I would look for an entry there. Or if we can push above, breach 78.61, and either You guys kind of know the system now, right? Either a high tight flag here or a break in base and hold and then look for a move above. I still think Roku has a ton of potential here, guys, for a big move, just based off the weekly alone, just how consolidated this is at the highs after that accumulated factor, right? I've talked about this one a lot. I deleted my old charts, but we had that 3 lower low accumulation here into this old swing low, as well as like this gap back here, which eventually got reclaimed, I think like right around here. I wish I kept my old charts, but let's see here. Maybe I can find it. Yeah, this was the gap back here. It kind of reclaimed. This is when we took our position. Remember, it had that big pop out. We had our SR flip right around here, and then we just started to gap up, right? And then we went from this gap, I'll try to extend it. And that's kind of where a lot of this is consolidating at, right? You guys can see this gap here is kind of where this consolidation is taking place now. This chart looks super good. I would kind of consider this like your SOS LPS, and I think we can get another big markup into this gap here, right? So going to be keeping this one on watch as well for kind of like secondary ads, if you will. Or maybe this might even be our third attempt on this one. So let's see if we can go 2 for 2 or 3 for 3, whatever it is. But this chart looks really good. Like I said, either a pullback into 70.20 or a break in base above 78.61, and kind of, once again, kind of a swing. I would probably take 5 to 10 contracts and look for that 91 spot. Last but not least, my friends, is going to be snow. I think it's time for snow. We talk a lot about earnings candle lows, right? And kind of like the earnings candle and using that as like your mother candle or like your footprint candle to really gauge what price is doing at the lows of it or the highs of it. And in this circumstance, we ended up kind of having our earnings candle or our footprint candle. We ended up breaking underneath, and we've really been consolidating against this old swing low way back here, guys. This is kind of like a big, big focal point on the chart at this 110 spot. 110.27 to be specific, and you guys can see we've kind of closed below, we wicked below, but on the monthly I think it's kind of telling the story here where we're seeing a ton of volume kind of come in over the last 2 months at this low without a new low being made. And we always want to look at candle spread, right? The candle spread's starting to get very, very tight, especially last month. We obviously just started October, but this looks like it could have a nice move here up into this gap at 123 to 135. Now, what my system is here, obviously you could just take calls and kind of risk that. They have their earnings coming up in November, but I think this can really just be a play if we can get above this earnings candle low, right, or the footprint candle low. If we can just pop above, right, do something like this, base that, we now have that equilibrium controlled, and you guys can see just how many daily candles I've tried to get above but can't close above. You got to think, though, this is getting absorbed. But if we can get a reclaim above 115, and just kind of hold there, maybe a day or two of rest, I do think that this can start to trend up to that 123.98. Maybe we get to earnings, and that's what kind of fulfills the gap here, all the way up to 135. But I would be looking, if we can claim 115.21 for like 125 to 130 calls. I probably might just trade, instead of the full gap, I might just go for the daily gap. So 130 would be my sweet spot. So 130C or 125, like I said, those would probably be the two strikes that I'd be looking at. But I absolutely love this chart if it can just reclaim above 115. Should remind you guys a lot of, like, I think it was Nike. Yeah, Nike, kind of the same thing here, right, where we had kind of like our earnings candle, right? You could either use the low or the close from that. But I remember that kind of was respecting the close of that earnings candle. So once we finally got a breach above that equilibrium, you guys can see we opened above, we held, and then it launched into the gap, right? So really interesting kind of chart that we have here. That is very similar to a lot of the other names that we've seen from these gap downs, and very, very tight spread. As I said, you guys can clearly see there's high volume coming in here at the lows without a new low being made, and really kind of comes down to this footprint candle here at 115. So love this chart. I'm going to keep my eyes on this one as well. And I kind of wanted to show you guys, there's a couple other ones that I was looking at. I don't think it's really worth its own little segment for me to edit, like kind of edit around. It was MSTR. I think Q4 does, or Q1, either one has a pop on crypto. And a lot of people are obsessed with Mara and Coin. Coin's just too expensive. IV and kind of just the volatility baked into that makes it really expensive. And Mara, obviously I don't like that name. And Mara, honestly too, it takes an incredible amount of a move in Bitcoin for Mara to even have anything. And if it does have something, it's really hard for it to sustain. And Mara, for the most part, guys, has just been in a general range. This isn't attractive. This is not attractive. Whereas I think like MSTR has been consistently building out higher lows. As you guys can see, it's been holding its moves that it has, and it moves without crypto really going crazy, right? It kind of does its own thing, which is what I like. So I'm kind of just watching MSTR on a break above this like lower high here at 180, 150. You guys can see we're already kind of breaking this trend line. But if we get above 180, 150, I think this can move to 200. So I'm kind of passively watching 200 calls on the weekly. You guys can see where that 180, 150 level kind of came from. So I am watching that. What else? What else? What else? I had one other one that I was kind of looking at. I don't remember anymore, guys. Oh yeah, Tesla. I already talked about this one. I'm already in the 300 calls, but it held above 246.38, which is that progression gap top. It looks good. Right? I don't think I'm going to add any new positions on this one, guys, just because we have earnings coming up. We have the Robotaxi event. Contracts are going to be extremely pricey, and obviously there's 2 binary events, so there's a lot of risk that just kind of comes with that. So just going to hold on to my December 300 calls. But overall, looks okay, right? The weekly is the main thing, but daily tapped into this kind of like this old equilibrium in between the gap at like 234, and then it reclaimed 246.38 and gave us a really healthy weekly candle, in my opinion. So it just really comes down to, can this break through 265 and then move into the 279, 290 spot? And yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for that, but. That's all I really wanted to go over, guys. Pretty much main focuses are QQQ, Crowd, AMD, MU, Amazon. Once AMD falls off, guys, I am going to replace Lam Research with AMD. But yeah, Roblox, Roku, Snow, MSTR, those are all kind of like the secondary focuses. If I had to choose my favorites from the secondary focuses, it would have to be Snow and Roku. I'd probably take Snow. I don't know. It's hard to say which one I like more. But Snow and Roku, probably the two. Roblox definitely has a chance, but just how long this has been consolidating, right? It kind of gives me Mara vibes. But Mara, once again, is kind of at the bottom, and it doesn't really show any indication of any like key levels being reclaimed, whereas Roblox has obviously taken an internal low, or I'm sorry, an internal high, and is now basing it as potential support. We do have the EMAs kind of curling as well, which is really nice to see. So, if I had to rank these guys, it would be probably Snow, Roku, Roblox in that order. And yeah, that's probably what I'll just kind of keep on my side screen. And yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with AMD, and then I'll replace that with LRCX. So I hope everybody has a good week. I'm pretty excited, man. There's a lot of charts that are really starting to kind of come to fruition and really have some big paydays. And I talk to you guys a lot. It's about, in my opinion, just avoiding the volatility, avoiding the impulse to really trade really short-dated contracts, and getting away from that mindset of making $1 million in one day or 5 minutes. Really just let these charts kind of tell the story and give you the direction, and be patient. Let daily stuff play out, weekly stuff play out. You don't need to always be in stuff every single minute. I think that's still, it's a facade. It's not real. A lot of traders don't make their money that way, and the worthwhile stuff does take time for it to play out. And there's a lot of charts out there that could pay. And that's why this week I wanted to give you guys a longer setup video, because there are a lot of charts, and I'm not going to dismiss that. There's a ton of charts that look good out there. And I'm really trying to side with stuff that has been in accumulation since 2022, 2023, that are just now starting to break, right, in particular sectors, and names that have previously led and obviously sold off on diverging volume, and now they're starting to catch structure again. Hence the cybersecurity, the heavy focus on semiconductors, right? And then obviously some of the stuff that's been accumulating for a while that are starting to see markups, right? There's a reason I was heavy on Shop, not heavy, but heavy, like kind of slamming my fist in that way on Shop, right? And Roku, those were the two ones. And I still think that they can have a continuation even from these current levels that they're at, right? So Shop, dude, it's hard. I really don't even know. Do I want to keep my eyes on Shop still? Because I closed this on Friday like an idiot. This still has room to base 83.50, right? And this can push to, in my opinion, $90, and that's still a pretty good move, guys. That's like, I think it can go up to 90.47. That's still a $7 move. So I mean, there's so many options out here, guys. There's so many options. and you really can't go wrong in my opinion. It sounds bad to say, but there's just a lot of names, and it's about not getting caught up in the volatility. I think that's the only way you can really lose right now on some of these names is if you go too heavy too quick, or you get caught in like a short dated expirations trying to catch gold. So just play it smart. Let things kind of play out. Plenty of time, I think, going into December or January contracts, even though they're pricier, will keep you safe, and you'll still be able to have a good one on them. So, with that being said, guys, this is kind of what I'm rolling into with next week. I wish everybody luck. Obviously, I will alert my stuff, and obviously, I'm gonna play it safe and take my time and let things really confirm before I do anything. So, I will see you guys on Monday, bright and early. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.